Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that acts like your personal knowledge archaeologist, really digging through the latest research to find those critical insights just for you.
It's good to be digging again.
Absolutely. You know, every single day, we're navigating a world just brimming with risk. It's everywhere. It's in our personal choices. Like, I don't know, deciding whether to invest in that new tech stock or not. And it's definitely present in the big global challenges, right? Climate crisis, the next potential pandemic.
Always something.
Always something. But have you ever stopped to think about how the way we actually understand risk, how we study it, has changed over time? It's a field that shifts and adapts, just like the risks themselves.
Yeah, that's the fascinating part. The scholarly study of risk isn't static at all. It's a living discipline, constantly refining its focus, adapting its lens to whatever the world's most pressing dangers seem to be at the time.
And that's exactly what we're going to excavate today. For this deep dive, we've got our hands on a brand new study. It's from the Journal of Risk Research, just published this April 2025. So, really hot off the presses.
Fresh findings.
Exactly. It's titled, very appropriately, An Archaeology of Risk, a bibliometric analysis of risk research. And it's not just another paper. It's more like a scientific shortcut, giving us this panoramic view of the whole landscape of risk research. It shows us the hidden intellectual layers.
Yeah, our mission today isn't really about dissecting one specific threat, like the details of cybersecurity or earthquake predictions.
Yeah.
Instead, we're stepping back. We're looking at how the study of risk itself has transformed over, more than 4 decades now.
Over 40 years.
This study is kind of like an intellectual X-ray. It exposes the currents of thought, the historical markers that have shaped this really vital field.
Okay, let's unpack this then.
Yeah.
Imagine we're actually archaeologists, but instead of digging for, ancient pottery or scrolls, we're meticulously sifting through decades of academic papers. Our goal: to unearth the hidden story of how we as a society have come to understand risk.
How do they actually do that?
So the researchers used a technique called bibliometric analysis. Basically, think of it as a superpowered census of academic keywords.
Okay.
They combed through nearly 6,000 articles published between 1981 and 2023. And these came from 2 of the most central journals in the field: Risk Analysis and the Journal of Risk Research.
The heavy hitters.
Exactly. Their big questions were, what has this field actually accomplished? How has it developed? And, crucially, what's next? What's on the intellectual horizon?
And what's so interesting here is that this isn't just about counting papers, right? It's about trying to discern let's call it the intellectual heartbeat of a whole discipline.
Yeah.
It reveals its shifting priorities, how it reacts to global events, the internal dynamics that shape how knowledge gets created in the first place. It's a quantitative journey through the evolution of an academic field that really impacts how we all live.
So let's dust off those findings. Let's see what those keywords actually reveal about these shifting sands of risk research.
Right.
First off, just the sheer volume of publications tells a story. Both journals have seen steady, consistent growth since 1981.
Just more and more research.
Yeah, we're talking peak years, like 2023 with 282 articles, and 2019, 2020 hitting 268. And here's an interesting detail. Risk Analysis actually had a steeper growth curve over that period compared to the Journal of Risk Research.
And this overall expansion, it isn't just, more paper being used. It's a signal, I think, of a growing scholarly interest, an intensification of focus.
Right.
It suggests that as the world gets more complex, more interconnected, the academic community sees the increasing urgency of risk. It's multifaceted. It needs more dedicated inquiry. It's clearly a dynamic field.
Okay, so let's talk about what the study calls the Big Three. These are the core domains that have dominated the keyword usage.
The core concepts.
Yeah. When you look at the most frequent keywords overall, it tells a pretty striking story. Top of the list: risk perception, a whopping 718 occurrences.
Wow.
Then comes risk communication at 478, then risk assessment at 453.
So connecting that to the bigger picture, that initial ranking, especially with perception and communication being so high, it suggests the field's foundational interest isn't just in quantifying risk.
Right.
It's also deeply about understanding how humans process, interpret, and, share information about it. It tells us straight away the human element is central.
And here's where it gets really interesting, maybe a little surprising. While risk perception and risk communication have seen consistent, pretty significant growth over time, becoming more and more prominent. Risk assessment, which is all about, calculating the odds, the probabilities, that's seen much slower growth.
Oh.
Yeah. In recent years, its frequency is about half that of risk communication and only like 40% that of risk perception.
Huh.
It really feels like we've shifted from just calculating the odds to really understanding how people feel and talk about those odds.
Yeah.
But, I mean, does that shift maybe risk making the field less rigorous? Are we overlooking the importance of getting the assessment right?
That's a really crucial question. And I think it speaks to a kind of maturation of the field. This isn't just the shift in focus. It's almost like a quiet revolution in how we approach danger. It implies that understanding the human mind, its biases, its fears, is now seen as equally important, maybe even more crucial than just the precise calculations, especially for abstract, long-term threats like climate change or even those immediate emotionally charged risks.
Right.
It really embraces theoretical developments like work by people like Baruch Fischoff on how people perceive risks, often inaccurately, or frameworks like Ortwin Wren's integrating communication into governance, emphasizing risk isn't just technical, it's societal, it's political.
So it's becoming more holistic.
Exactly. A more holistic, interdisciplinary view that really acknowledges the critical role of human behavior and social dynamics.
And the study found fascinating differences between the two journals themselves on these core domains. It's almost like he developed, I don't know, distinct personalities.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Risk perception actually decreased in risk analysis's keyword frequency over time, but it consistently increased in the Journal of Risk Research from 1998 onwards.
Huh. Polar opposites.
Kind of. And similarly, risk communication, its keyword frequency shot up rapidly for Journal of Risk Research, but stayed surprisingly stable in risk analysis.
Okay.
But risk assessment, that was far more common, and increased slightly in risk analysis. It really is like each journal has its own personality shaping the lens.
Yeah, that highlights how even within the same field, different academic venues can develop these unique focal points.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, right? If you were a researcher with a new paper on, say, the psychology of climate denial.
Which journal do you send it to?
Exactly. Which door do you knock on first and why? These institutional factors, they mediate how knowledge gets created and shared, often prioritizing certain aspects of risk over others.
So digging deeper into these intellectual layers, what other sort of artifacts or key concepts did they unearth?
Well, trust emerged as the most common concept keyword. 175 occurrences.
Trust.
And it had two really significant spikes in usage, one between 2001 and 2012, and then again more recently, 2019 to 2023.
Why the spikes?
They seem directly linked to the influence of highly cited work on trust. Researchers like Ortwin Wren and Douglas Levine, or Kvetkovich and Lofsted, and of course Paul Slovic.
Ah, Slovic.
Yeah. They all emphasize that public acceptance and understanding of risk are heavily mediated by whether people actually trust the sources of information or the institutions managing the risk.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, this trend with trust isn't accidental. It really underscores its critical role in how societies respond to risk. I mean, think about it. During a pandemic, if there's no trust in public health bodies or the government.
Doesn't matter how good the science is.
Exactly. Even the most scientifically sound assessment and communication strategies can just fall flat. So integrating trust into the research moves us beyond just presenting facts. It helps us understand the relational dynamics that are crucial for effective risk governance.
Were there other concepts that popped up?
Yeah, other important ones like vulnerability and the social amplification of risk gained traction, but later, often not really appearing until the mid-2000s, which reflects, I think, a broadening understanding of who gets affected by risk and how risks can be magnified by social processes.
Okay, now for the hazard topics. This is where you can really see the research agenda mirroring real-world events, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's almost uncanny sometimes.
Climate change is the most common hazard topic overall. 111 occurrences, 2 major peaks in usage. Maybe not surprising, given its ongoing impact.
Right, it's the background radiation of risk now.
Kind of. But then there's COVID-19. This keyword saw this dramatic rapid rise, appeared 108 times just between 2021 and 2023.
Wow.
After being basically absent before 2020. That's astonishingly responsive for academia, isn't it?
It is, but...
So what does it all mean? Is the research agenda just a mirror reflecting global headlines?
I'd say it's more like a delayed echo chamber. Because what this study really reveals is that inherent inertia in academia,
Okay.
which is a crucial insight if you're trying to apply research in real time to fast-moving crises.
Yeah.
We see terrorism keyword usage surge after 2001, right? A direct response to 9/11.
Yeah.
Similarly, nuclear waste saw a big increase after the 1987 Yucca Mountain decision in the U.S. These correlations are clear, But the publication process itself introduces delays, which raises that big question. How responsive can academia really be when the research process itself has these built-in time lags?
Right. That brings us neatly to the dynamics of publication itself. Lags, the lenses, the sort of local lore of each journal. That noticeable time lag you mentioned between an event and the actual publication of empirical research, it's significant. Why? Well, you've got extensive data collection, rigorous analysis, the whole peer review process.
Oh, peer review.
And then journal revisions. It's just not a quick turnaround.
Not at all.
So if there's, say, a 3-year lag between an event like COVID starting and the bulk of research getting published, does that mean policymakers are just perpetually playing catch-up? By the time we understand one crisis, the next one is here.
That is precisely the challenge, and funding cycles only make it worse, right?
How so?
Researchers often have to apply for grants after an event has happened to study its impacts.
Right.
That pushes back the start of the research, further delaying when findings get published. It's particularly tough for rapidly evolving risks, pandemics, extreme weather, where timely research could really inform policy. It just highlights how these structural, institutional factors within academia shape our understanding, often prioritizing some things and delaying others.
And the journals themselves play a role through things like special issues, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like Risk Analysis had one on air pollution health risks in 2016. Journal of Risk Research did issues on transparency and several on COVID-19. These are valuable, sure, but they can create these temporary surges in specific topics.
Like a temporary intellectual gold rush.
Exactly. Potentially skewing the landscape by encouraging researchers to focus on what fits that special issue.
And as we touched on earlier, those inherent personalities of the journals are really significant. They act as distinct intellectual filters. Risk analysis tending more towards risk assessment, terrorism, food safety, air pollution, often things you can quantify, maybe engineer solutions for. Whereas Journal of Risk Research traditionally emphasizes risk perception, risk communication, risk management, and now trust, climate change, COVID-19. It leans more into the social, behavioral, policy sides.
These differences aren't just about methods, then. They shape the questions being asked.
Totally, and the types of solutions being explored.
Another fascinating trend the study highlights is how concepts sometimes cluster together, like risk perception, risk communication, and risk management, sometimes merged into what they call a broader sociology of risk cluster. That's more than just academic jargon, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That's not just a linguistic shift. It's a powerful sign, I think, of increasing interdisciplinary collaboration.
Wow.
And recognizing that risks are holistic. They need multiple perspectives to really understand and address them. For instance, in the 2014-2018 period, the study found those three, perception, communication, management, grouped into that single sociology of risk cluster.
That hadn't happened before.
It was a novel combination compared to earlier periods. It indicates a more integrated approach, recognizing that managing risk isn't just about the numbers, it's about how people understand, respond, and participate in mitigation within their social contexts. It shows the field maturing, moving from silos to a more unified view.
The evolution of risk assessment terminology itself is also quite revealing, isn't it? Showing different intellectual lineages.
Yeah.
Over time, the term kind of diverged. You see terms like risk analysis and probabilistic risk assessment appearing, describing more quantitative approaches.
And that divergence is deeply rooted in history. Think about the U.S. Love Canal scandal in the late 70s.
Right, the toxic waste disaster.
Exactly. That really entrenched toxicology within quantitative risk assessment. It showed the critical need to calculate health impacts from chemical exposure. And similarly, the 1983 National Academy of Sciences Red Book, a foundational report standardizing how health risks from chemicals are evaluated in the U.S. that solidified risk assessment for chemical and radiation hazards. These events really carved out specific paths for how these terms and methods developed.
So looking ahead now, this study makes you wonder, what does this observed rise in keyword diversity really mean? Is it genuine intellectual expansion? Is the field truly broadening its horizons? Or is it partly just adapting to digital discovery, search engine optimization? Having more specific keywords makes your paper easier to find online.
That's a really important question. Is the growth in keyword variety truly reflecting deeper diversification in content and method? Or is it, as you say, just adapting to digital visibility demands, keywords as navigational tools for databases?
Hmm.
It encourages us to look beyond the surface metrics and think about the motivations behind keyword choices. It's kind of a paradox in the information age. Are we expanding knowledge or just optimizing its packaging?
For you, the listener, there's real practical value here, I think. If you're a student or just someone curious about risk,
Mm-hmm.
this deep dive shows you what's currently important in the field. It's like having a map of academic interests, helping you choose relevant topics or just understand how the field evolves as you encounter information.
And for early career researchers, this study is an invaluable roadmap. It helps you see where your work might make a meaningful contribution, how to balance emerging topics like climate change or pandemics with established knowledge in areas like risk perception.
Right.
Understanding these macro trends helps you position your research for impact and relevance.
And really, for anyone who engages with information in our complex world, understanding how research fields adapt to society's needs is just crucial for critical thinking.
Definitely.
It helps you see how knowledge itself is shaped, how it's shared, and how it responds, or tries to respond, to the world's biggest challenges. It's science in action.
Though it is important we acknowledge the study's limitations, as the authors themselves do. It relies on author-chosen keywords, right? Which are limited in number, can vary in precision. Plus, it only analyzed 2 journals. Central ones, yes, but not all influential risk literature, especially interdisciplinary work elsewhere.
Good point.
And focusing only on keywords means missing nuances from titles or the broader content. And fascinatingly, it didn't look at the geography of researchers or who the most frequent authors are. That leaves a big part of the human story untold.
Despite those limitations, though, the study points to some really exciting future research avenues, new intellectual digs, if you will.
Yeah.
Based on their recommendations, future work could explore the who. Which individuals are really driving the field? Who collaborates with whom? The where. Where are they based? Where's the funding coming from? Where's the research actually conducted? The why. Why publish in these specific journals over others? And the how. What are the detailed, often unwritten rules of publishing and engaging with special issues?
Right. So while this study paints this broad, really illuminating picture of what has been researched, it also highlights all of these fascinating layers we still need to uncover about the human and systemic side of risk research itself. It reminds us that knowledge creation is this complex social process influenced by everything from headlines to funding priorities.
And that brings us towards the end of our deep dive for today. I think the main takeaway is that the academic field of risk research is incredibly dynamic.
Absolutely.
It's constantly adapting its focus, shifting from maybe purely quantitative assessment towards deeply understanding human perception, communication, response. And as we've seen, these shifts are often directly driven by the real-world events shaping our lives.
So maybe the thought to leave folks with is this. Given this evidence of how quickly research does adapt eventually to events like COVID-19, what new risk are we facing right now that might dominate research keywords a decade from today? And are we prepared for the intellectual shifts that will demand?
A provocative thought indeed. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you feel a little more well-informed and maybe a little more curious about the archaeology of knowledge itself. Until next time.